There's a story by Plato, and it's called The Allegory of the Cave. So basically, what this story is about, it's three men who were tied to chains, and their whole life they looked at this rock. And this rock had shadows running across it. So you can imagine a cave where three men are trapped. Their hands are tied to these chains, and they're looking at this rock, and there's a cave, and the light goes into the tunnel and is casting these shadows, and they're looking at these shadows as if they're real. And what are these shadows coming from? They're coming from people, they're coming from animals, and it's basically a whole living culture outside of that cave, but they never got to see it. One day, this man was set free. He didn't have the shackles on him anymore. He didn't have those chains on him anymore. He wasn't bound to anything. He went outside of the cave and was blinded by the sunlight. And what he saw was the real essence of that shadow. He didn't really know how to take it in. At first, it was a slow process. He thought it was fake at first, and then he goes on and understands that what he was seeing the whole time for that part of his life was not reality. It wasn't real. The shadows at the time of where he was at were very real in that type of way, but now that he sees the real thing, he goes back in to the cave where his other homies are, and he's trying to break the story down, and they don't get it. They don't understand, like, that they're not seeing the full spectrum of reality. They're only seeing the shadow version of it. And he doesn't get through to them. Those men decide to stay there in that cave. So he is trying to figure out the shadows now, and he just doesn't understand them because he's at a different level of reality. And he goes back and lives amongst those people and gets out of that cave. So he leaves those men behind, where he spent his whole life looking at that rock. So, what is this story trying to tell us? Had the car running for a little bit. As you can see, it's snowing outside, so I'm trying to warm my car up. What is the story telling us? There's different levels of reality. There is, in other words, different levels of consciousness that you can tap into. Now, for me, seeing and hearing that story, it's very much someone who is living on the lower spectrum of reality, lower level of consciousness. Now, you could think of this in a few different ways, like somebody coming from, like, maybe a traumatic background, or they had it more rough and grew up with a more negative type of energy. When they go out into the world, they have a different reality, a different way of seeing life compared to the reality of positivity and a really good upbringing. For me, that's like the basic level, is really your upbringing and your reality from that piece. That's like the baseline. I feel like the baseline puts you at, in terms of like a ladder of energy, it can either be at like the lowest of low, where like you were fucking abused as a kid or whatever, to really high, where your parents fed you really good food, they loved you, they nurtured you, they pretty much showed you really positive elements of life. Now, when you have different realities and different levels of energy in terms of where you are at, it's very hard to see like where you're actually at in life and not just tell yourself like a made up story of where you're at. It's like the men in that cave that only saw the shadows, but they're like, dude, this is real. Like, this is as real and like almost tangible as like people outside of this fucking cave. And they didn't know people were outside of that cave. They didn't even know like a whole culture existed out there. But when that dude realized like what was going on, he's like, dude, I can never go back to that. Like he transcended a level above what he was used to. Now, this story gets real as shit. Like, I really recommend you going and checking it out yourself. I could be wrong on like the exact details of that story, but that was the basic premise of what I got. We were talking about it in my philosophy class this past like several weeks. And with these energy levels and these different spectrums of reality, it's very important to realize that like as you go up, there is a sense of like grieving and loss. It's very strange because it's like the more you get closer to reality, the more it's like you are living and the more you become your own essence. But at the same time, you're shedding layers of yourself as you move along this path of whatever the hell the next level is for you. And in terms of energy and all of that, like there's different habits that look similar to the old like spectrum that you were at, but with this new reality, there's also new habits and new principles that you see the world through. And as you keep going up and keep going up, keep going up, there's certain habits that you get rid of, and there's certain habits and principles that you adopt. And as you keep moving and you grow with your tribe or your people or however you want to call it, it's a different way of being and different way of seeing. And I think as you get closer and closer to your essence and your true reality, it gets scarier. That's the thing. I feel like it's not this like you're, walking on the golden road or whatever, just like skipping through life like all happy-go-lucky. I think there's times of that, there's pieces of that, there's glimpses of like this blissful state where you're really, really happy and you're authentically your own and you're expressing yourself in your genuine way and living your life through your purpose and whatever that is. But at the same time, I think it gets really, really fucking scary because there's certain people that you need to let go in the process of getting to that next step and getting to that next peak of reality of whatever that is for you. And at the same time, it's like you're shedding versions of yourself. You're shedding versions of people who supported you at one point in time that maybe shouldn't be there in your reality anymore. That's not to say that people aren't going to stick with you throughout this walk, throughout this journey that we have. But I think overall, as you start getting higher and higher and higher up through these reality fields, I think the path gets narrow up to a peak. I don't have any idea what that peak looks like, but I feel and I'm starting to realize that it's getting very narrow, and like keeping your habits and your mental state on this path is very, very important, especially if you are climbing that success ladder as well. You're trying to, make more money or have quality friends or have a really solid, significant other in your life. It gets like where before, you weren't concerning yourself with maybe going to bed early or waking up early or whatever the fuck, but it just gets narrower and narrower. And those habits again, they change and they evolve and they transform over time. And with that being said, it's very fatiguing, if that's a word, fatiguing. At a certain point in time, I think there is such a sense of loss, like from the inside, where it feels almost hollow in a way. It's very strange, like this energy field that you're trying to evolve from and become something stronger from is... Sorry, I just got distracted. This car just like literally almost hit me. Backing up, motherfucker. That you're trying to grow from is ultimately no longer serving you. So moving up through that energy field can be very fatiguing. Let me take a step back here. If you look at nature, nature has a way of growing and expanding, and like summertime, nature is very expansive. It's dancing with human beings. People are out on the beach. They're enjoying the warm temperature. They're traveling, and people travel all year long, but in the summertime, it's very much a time of immersing yourself with nature. And then you have fall. And fall is like, I live in Nevada, so it gets like a little chilly, but it's almost time like a letting go. The trees are letting go of their leaves. The flowers are starting to let go of their petals. And we start seeing this process with nature just falling away. But it doesn't judge itself. Like when I look at a tree and it's still that fucking tree with those roots in it, and it's still standing strong, it's just letting go a version of what was. And then you have winter. And with winter, it's very cold. People usually are inside more. The nature and human beings are a little more separated. Really, you see bare branches a lot of the times with trees, and it's almost like a time of true grieving, of loss, of letting go. And again, not judging yourself for that. I think it's so easy for people to get wrapped up in their feelings of like, oh man, like I want to hold on to this old version of myself or friends or family that I don't want to let go of yet. But I think that's where like the real piece of suffering starts to sneak in there. And another note with wintertime, I notice that I get more tired during wintertime. And that could be because of a number of things, but ultimately I think adapting to, what's going on in terms of maybe needing to sleep more and not judging yourself over that. And honestly, to be real, like I judge myself all the time. It's like, dude, you're sleeping too much. Like you need to wake up earlier. You need to do this. And I think it's a reminder of let that shit go. And spring, we look at that and it's a time of growth. It's a time of expanding again. And we are not that far from nature. I think technology and all of this shit like kind of separates us sometimes, but like the moment we understand how close we are to nature, we can really see our own inner nature and our emotions and the way we operate oftentimes, especially in terms of energy. Like on the inside, we're constantly changing and evolving, especially with the seasons. Like we are one with, man, this is sounding so fucking hippy dippy. I know, but like our energy is very much a part of nature, and it is constantly changing. It kind of seems like we are the ones that try to hold an image. We try to hold an image of what we think we are and who we think we should be, when in reality, that shit is constantly moving on and on. And it's like, we think we're staying here at this level, this reality that we're seeing. But really, it's like, if you're staying stagnant, that's just dropping lower and lower and lower, where nothing ever stays the same. Like, you're either moving up or you're moving down. You're either living or you're dying. And there's certain habits that promote each reality. And ultimately, it's up to the question and questioning yourself of, damn, like, what the fuck is my reality right now? Like, what does that really authentically look like? And how do I move up from there? What do I let go of? And what do I keep? How do I go about this? And being real with yourself. Look into that story. I'm pretty much done. It's by Plato, The Allegory of the Cave. Check it out when you got some time. Until next time, see ya.